Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys joining me for today's episode. And guys, today I just want to have a little bit of talk with you guys, just a little discussion sort of on, it's not really a fishing tip or anything, but it's sort of a bass fishing discussion. Just want to talk about to you guys how bass fishing has changed, the evolution of it, where it has come from, where it is now, what those changes are. And to be honest with you guys, I want to sort of explain this in the video a little bit today. Bass fishing has changed, and it has not been for the better. And I'm not saying that that is inevitable and that's just the way it is moving forward. We can change it, we always can. But I really want to talk about how bass fishing has changed in today's episode here. Also, guys, to get started, thank you very much for everybody that's taken time to support Advanced Bass Fishing here, man. If you're one of the viewers that have been using all the links that I put in every video description to help the channel out, thank you very much for me and my family, everybody that's been subscribing to the channel or joining the channel as a channel member. Really appreciate that. Okay, I've been bass fishing since the late 1960s, really in the 70s when I was in grade school more than anything else. And it's pretty much not even recognizable to what it was back then. A lot of you guys that are on the channel watching these videos may or may not even been alive, or, may have been just, very young at that particular time. But I've had a chance to witness it in pretty attentive detail in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2010s, and 2020s. And, I've seen a lot of different changes. So here are some of the biggest changes that I have seen that have really affected the fish more than anything else, and, how bass fishing is. Number one is the bass are so much more educated right now. The bass are harder to catch, and they've evolved to be more difficult to catch. This is a result of a couple different things. There's two different things primarily the way that I think it is. Number one is, the fact that there's more people fishing than ever. It's like the amount of people fishing in 2025 versus back 30 or 40 years ago, guys, it's unbelievable. It's like if you would go to some of the popular lakes across the country, back, say, an example in the early 1980s versus now in 2025, it is like you didn't hardly ever see anyone fishing. During the week, you hardly ever saw a boat, and even on the weekends, there wasn't that many boats. There wasn't many tournaments, simply not that many people fishing. And also not as many people on the lake that were just recreational, people, like in pontoon boats and jet skis and, fishing, fun boats. You didn't even see that many people. There wasn't as many people on the water. So as a result, bass have evolved to become more difficult to catch and more wary. One of my things that I really believe in bass fishing is that bass evolve quickly as a survival mechanism. They learn very quickly how to avoid danger. And danger is often in terms of what they've seen the last 34 years, human presence. So when you have all these increased noise decibel levels from outboard motors, from electronic beams, trolling motors, different type of activity on the water, that bass have evolved to stop feeding as much during those time periods where you have accelerated noise underwater. This is one of the biggest changes that I have seen in bass fishing by far, is how bass have gotten harder to catch. Now, one of the couple different reasons, another reason it's changed why they've gotten harder to catch, is that there's not as many bass. I have no doubt in my mind, I'm 100% sure with this, that our bass populations in 2025 are a fraction of what they were 40 or 50 years ago, a tiny fraction. And a lot of times people don't agree with this because they will use tournament statistics as a measuring board for quality fishing. Say, for example, you look back in a tournament that happened in 1985 and you look at the weights in there. Say the tournament was at Sam Rayburn Lake in Texas, and then you look at the weights in a tournament in 2025 and the weights are bigger. And so people say, well, look, the fishing's great now. It's better than it's ever been. It's better than it was 40 years ago. Guys, that is not because there's more fish in the lake. It's because we have gotten so good at catching the fish that are in the lake. Back 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, the technological advancements in boats and fishing lures and rods and reels and electronics were not there where they are now. And we didn't have access to mapping technology, or we had a fraction of the lure, categories that we have now, just a fraction of the amount of lures. You had monofilament line, you had, flashers for depth finders. Most people didn't even have lake maps. The lake maps, a lot of people had to get them from the geographic survey, like contour maps, before the lake was impounded. So a lot of people just, they didn't have the tools that they have now. And in 2025, even though there's a fraction of the bass in our lakes, people have become so adept at catching those fish, there's no stone unturned. It's like you can literally find where every fish is in the lake now with electronic technology. And then once you do find those fish, you've got a myriad of high-tech, very realistic lures to pursue those fish with, and so many different lure categories that look real. So if you would take the technology in 2025, let's say, for example, you took a top Bass Pro that's in 2025, and you would put him, say, go back in time, if you could get in a time machine, and put Kevin Van Dam, back in 1978 on the Bassmaster Tournament Trail, he would win every tournament, guys. If I believe this, if you put Kevin Van Dam or somebody his caliber on the tournament trail, if you could go back in time and let Kevin have all the stuff he's got right now, all the knowledge and gear and all that type of stuff, he would literally win every tournament. The only tournaments he would not win are the ones he broke down on the way to weigh-in or something. That is the difference with it. And he would catch record-breaking weights in every tournament with it. I mean, with all the lures we have now. So one of the biggest changes is the fact that fishing is simply tougher and there's not as many fish. The fish are harder to catch. And I don't know if there's any going back on this. It's like the only thing that we can really do to counter that is, like, you can't tell people they can't fish. You can things you can do, like you can have stricter creel limits, you can have limits on seasons, you can reduce the number of tournaments that we have, which would be a big thing. We could build more lakes. There's things that you can do with that. But right now we don't really have there's no governing body as far as bass fishing in this country that has the best interest of the sport in mind, I think, in my opinion. The conservation departments, you can't really count on them because the conservation departments in most states, they don't perceive bass fishing the same way as you and I do. There are bass fishing anglers watching this channel. They see fisheries as like a resource for people to keep and eat fish. That's their deal. They don't have that same mindset as far as conservation efforts and sustainability of the fisheries, for a sporting use. It's more of like a food source for them. And then you have tournament organizations and people that enable tournaments, like Chamber of Commerce's and different lake managers that have a vested interest in getting as many tournaments as they can to the lake, or getting as many people as they can to the lake. Same with the fishing industry. So there's from a profit standpoint, as a business standpoint, we have a segment of the bass fishing industry, a large segment, that they want the sport to get bigger and bigger and bigger, which means more and more pressure, which means the fish getting tougher and tougher to catch. And that's just sort of the world we live in right now. It's going to be a very, very difficult task to try to return it to it was back like in the 70s. And from my standpoint, guys, I've fished all these decades for 50 years. The bass fishing in the 70s and early 80s was by far the best any time of this country ever had. There were more big fish, there were more bass, they were easier to catch. It was just a great time. And that's another big change that we've seen in the sport of fishing, is you don't see the number of big fish like we used to. Example I'll give you guys is down here in Table Rock Lake where I live at, most of the year, it's like if you fish between like February to June at a tournament at Table Rock Lake 50 years ago or 40 years ago, it would take an 8 to 9 pounder in that range would win big bass every tournament. And now most big bass at Table Rock are like a 4 or 5 pounder will win big bass. You simply don't have the big fish that you used to, not just at Table Rock, but any lake across the country. So anyway, I don't mean it to be like a downer video or sobering video. I just wanted to run that by you about some changes I've seen, and hope you guys are well, and shoot me some comments, and we'll talk later.